Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. Not quite. Not quite. No, it's only week 0, and there are only 4 games on the docket this week. Kind of disappointing. Normally, with week 0, we've at least got 7 or 8 games. It's interesting how these games work, too. You've got one at noon, one at 4, one at 8, and then one at 11:59 because it's Hawaii hosting a game. But when it comes to week 0, it's a nice little tradition. You would at least like there to be 7 or 8 games. It is what it is, though. This year, college football, it's kind of weird. Everyone gets a double bye. I guess FSU, they might be getting a triple bye because they're playing in week 0. And same thing with Georgia Tech. But I would just go through these 4 games, and then I'm going to be talking about predictions and reacting to bowl predictions because there's only 4, games to react to or to predict. I did want to give the video at least a little bit of substance. So this first one, this is the first game of college football, the 2024 season. It is FSU and Georgia Tech in Dublin, Ireland. We've got FSU sitting right now -11. The original spread was -14.5. It got bet down all the way to, I think, 10, and now it's back up to 11. FSU sitting at number 10 in the country. A lot of people in on Georgia Tech, thinking it's going to be a slower game. Me personally, I do like FSU, believe it or not, to cover this spread over Georgia Tech, win this game 31-10. I'm guessing it's going to be a lower scoring first half. DJ Uiagalelei making his debut with FSU. FSU breaking in a lot of new players, losing Keon Coleman, Travis. We know how they finished off last year, getting destroyed by Georgia after missing the playoff despite going 13-0. But I do think they get the job done overseas. I think it might be like a 6 o'clock start or a 7 o'clock start in Ireland, or maybe a 5 o'clock start. But either way, I do have FSU winning this game 31-10 there. Moving on to the 4 o'clock game, it is Montana State traveling to take on New Mexico. Montana State sitting as 9-point favorites in this game. They are one of the 3 to 4 best FCS teams in college football. At New Mexico, they're always pretty bad. Kind of an interesting discrepancy here. You've got New Mexico, a 68% chance to win via the ESPN FPI, but they're 9-point underdogs. I think that has to do with the fact that Montana State is an FCS team. Kind of a weird situation with the FPI, but I do like Montana State, believe it or not, to win this game 23-10. And honestly, this is just a random game. I just threw up a random prediction there, but I do like Montana State. They are a top FCS team. Moving on to the 8 o'clock game, it is SMU. SMU with a lot of hype this year. They've got a very manageable schedule going to a Power 4 conference from the American. They will be traveling to take on Nevada. The Wolfpack, they are always one of the worst FBS teams. They are sitting 27.5-point underdogs. SMU, 87% chance to win this game. The returning QB, Preston Stone, coming off that injury. They had a good year last year until he got hurt. I like SMU to win this game very easily. It's interesting. SMU last year, they would run up the score. They'd have games where they'd have over 40 points in the first half against teams like Nevada. This year, I don't think that's going to happen, or at least in this game specifically. I think it might be a little bit lower scoring for SMU, but they still win this game. And if I had to pick, I do think they cover this spread of 27.5 because Nevada is just really bad. And last year, SMU had a propensity to blow out teams just like Nevada. And then moving on to the 11:59 game. The reason this game's at 11:59 is because technically if it would have been 7 o'clock local time, that would make it midnight on the East Coast, which would technically mean it's on a Sunday, which they don't want to do. So it's a 6:59 local Hawaiian time start, meaning 11:59 on the East Coast. There is no spread to this game because it is an FCS versus FBS. And normally when it comes to those games, they don't have spreads, especially if they're going to be blowouts until the day of the game. Hawaii still playing at that complex. They do not have a new stadium even scheduled to be built yet, so it's going to be a while. And how about Delaware State traveling to a tropical place? Good for them. Although I do think Hawaii should win this game relatively easily, 38-7. They do have a 99% chance to win, according to the FBI. It's your traditional bad FCS team versus FBS team. Even though Hawaii's not good either, this year they might be a little bit improved based on how bad they've been in years prior. And then so this is what I'm going to be reacting to. This is Brett McMurphy's predictions for Week 0, the end of the season, who's going to make the playoff, everything like that. So the projected college football playoff field, you've got Oregon as the number 1 overall seed. Not too surprising. It's either going to be Oregon or Ohio State. He's got Oregon at number 1, Ohio State at number 5. That's interesting. Ohio State facing Texas State. Texas State out of the Sun Belt, huh? Alabama at number 2. I do think Alabama's kind of being overlooked right now with Jalen Milroe because they lost Saban. We'll see. Miami is the number 3 overall team. I mean, the ACC is going to get a team that automatically gets a bye. So will the Big 12. I think people are going to be very pissed off about that because it's going to force teams like Ohio State, like potentially a Georgia, under the Miamis, under the Utahs, just because of the conference that they play in. That could be a dynamic that's interesting to watch. But you can see those top 4 teams getting a bye. Utah right now is the slight favorite in the Big 12. I tend to think Kansas or Kansas State or maybe Oklahoma State, they might win it. It's going to be a mosh pit, but Utah certainly is. With Cam Rising returning, we'll see. Ohio State, obviously, if they don't win the Big Ten, they'll likely be a number 5 or 6 seed. Same thing with Georgia. If Alabama wins it, that's how the dynamic works there. Ole Miss is the number 7 team. I'm kind of not buying Ole Miss. There's a lot of hype around Ole Miss right now. We'll have to see. LSU is a hard team to predict just because they were missing a lot of their talents. They lost a lot of it. They should have an improved defense. We'll see. Penn State, certainly a team that I could see making the playoff just because they always seem to finish like anywhere in the range of like 8 to 12 or 13. Virginia Tech out of the ACC. Yeah, a little bit of a bold prediction there. I can understand it because Virginia Tech has an easy schedule. They're really not challenged in a game until like week 9. Of course, this is Virginia Tech. They could lose earlier than that to a bad team. Iowa is the number 11 team. That's because Iowa also has an easy schedule. And then Texas State, the group of 5 team. Personally, Texas State, that's a pretty bold prediction there. But let's take a look at these matchups. This is the first round games. Penn State versus LSU. Penn State 2.5-point favorites. That's a sweet matchup in Baton Rouge, Tiger Stadium. Texas State, Ohio State. Dude, people would be pissed off about this. Ohio State 26.5-point favorites in a playoff game. They would immediately be saying that they shouldn't have an auto bid for the group of 5. That game would be at the Horseshoe. 26. It's like one of those non-conference free wins for Ohio State, basically. Nothing against Texas State, but that's kind of the dynamic there. Georgia and Iowa. Georgia sitting 18.5-point favorites in that hypothetical game. Ole Miss hosting Virginia Tech, 13-point favorites. And then the quarterfinal games, Ohio State 11-point favorites over Utah. Alabama 5-point favorites over Ole Miss. Oregon in the Rose Bowl against Penn State. I don't know how Oregon would only be a 1-point favorite there. That's kind of weird. And then Georgia, 15-point favorites over Miami. And then he's got the semifinals, Alabama, Georgia, another SEC game. Oregon versus Ohio State. That might be the third matchup that those two teams have. And then he does have Georgia versus Oregon in the national title game. And then some of the other bowl games to look at. Minnesota, Louisville. I do think Louisville is probably going to be worse than people think, honestly. You know, it's weird. The dynamic with the 12-team playoff now, pretty much all of these bowl games are crap. I mean, there are a few decent ones, but just because of the 12-team playoff where all the New Year's 6 bowl games are going to be part of the playoff, all of the other bowl games outside of that kind of turn into... you've got, like, look at this. If you don't make the playoff and you're Texas, you're going to the Citrus Bowl. You're not going to a New Year's 6 bowl. FSU in the Gator Bowl against Auburn. Michigan versus Missouri. Yeah, I could see Michigan missing it because they just have a quarterback issue. They've got some problems. Michigan has definitely like 3 or 4 really talented players who are going to be first-round picks, but they have some big holes, so we'll have to see. USC and Kansas State in the Alamo Bowl. That would be a good matchup. SMU, 18.5-point favorites over South Florida in the Military Bowl. Clemson. A lot of people think Clemson could make the playoff. Look at Notre Dame. Imagine Notre Dame misses the playoff. They've got an easy schedule. As long as Notre Dame goes 10-2, I think they'll make the playoff for sure. If they go 9-3, they'll probably miss it, though, just because they don't have a conference championship game. Boise State, they're another team that people think possibly could make the playoff. Kind of an interesting development there with Malachi Nelson, the former 5-star QB, not starting for Boise State. Maryland, people do like Maryland. I'm surprised because... they lost Tagovailoa, the quarterback. Iowa State, that's another just Big 12 team. West Virginia versus Air Force. West Virginia is only 10-point underdogs to Penn State. I think West Virginia is going to keep that game close. Look at this. It's just the Detroit Tigers or the Detroit Lions logo. The Detroit Bowl. They don't have a sponsor for it. Rutgers versus Central Michigan. They'll probably get a sponsor, I'm guessing. Yeah, Rutgers has been better recently. Cincy versus Tulane, a rematch of the American Conference. and just some other games there, some pretty crappy matchups. But yeah, that's just something interesting to go over. Either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.